fleeting. But I just want to welcome everybody to the UBC Dean's Community Engagement Series. And this is a series we've been hosting each year in my role as a Dean Pro Tem. So my name is Jan Hare, and I'm really pleased to be able to serve as the Dean Pro Tem of the UBC Faculty of Education. And I'm also a very proud UBC alum, having graduated from the Department of Educational Studies here in the faculty. I am a guest on these lands, being an Anishinaabe and a member of the Chiging First Nation. And so that is my father's community, and my mother is from the Bear Island First Nation. So my family and ancestral roots are from Northern Ontario. But I'm going to say I also spent a lot of time running around the Native Friendship Centre on Spadina Street in Toronto as my family, as they moved back and forth from Northern Ontario to Toronto, back and forth when I was young. And I guess I just really wanted to share that with you, just as it's a little bit about me, but I think it also speaks to the significance of the formative years and the kinds of impressions that are really left upon young people or children in those early years. I would like to acknowledge that UBC Vancouver is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam people, and that UBC Okanagan is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Silks Okanagan Nation. These lands have always been places of learning for Indigenous peoples. Both land and these first peoples, I'm going to say, are our first teachers. And they have for millennia passed on their culture, histories, and traditions from one generation to the next on these lands. I would also like to recognize that you are joining us today from many places near and far, and acknowledge the traditional owners are caretakers of those lands. And I believe Sarah will put in a really wonderful website, nativeland.ca, if you want to learn more about the land on which you are then situated, or may have spent some time living and learning. And so opportunity in the chat to be able to have a look. This series, and I'm always really excited about this series, it's really designed to showcase research and practice and bringing these together and to engage us in discussion really around important questions and significant priorities that are impacting on educators today. And so these sessions explore how we as a community can empower young people to face the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. And as well, we want to support educators and others who support teaching and learning in a host of settings with ideas and inspirations and innovations that come from our speakers that join us for each of these series. So today, for this first session, we'll be focusing on the big theme of learning and leading in the early years. And I recognize the multiple approaches to learning in the early years, such as play-based, academic, Reggio or Waldorf, Indigenous and outdoor approaches, just to name a few. And we want to ensure a variety of perspectives, whether historical, philosophical, and methodological, then inform our work in the area of early learning. Early learning and care is a critical phase, a critical time in the lives, in children's lives. And as well, the families and communities in which they are nurtured in really play a significant role. So I'm really pleased this evening that our presenters will give focus to different perspectives, experiences, programs, and approaches in early learning. And they really do bring a wealth of experience to our conversation this evening. And I also would like to draw your attention to a conference that UBC will be hosting, the Early Years Conference in downtown Vancouver, and this will be in February 2024, and you'll see a slide here. And this, with a diverse audience in mind, this conference is really ideal for those involved in the realm of working with young children and families. And this year's theme is Connecting and Belonging in the Early Years, Enhancing Relationships Between Professionals, families, and children. So we hope you will consider joining us for this very important conference. So welcome to this evening, and I will now invite Dr. Lynn Tomlinson to open the session. Lynn.
Thanks, Dr. Hare. And welcome to all our guests today. My name is Lynn Tomlinson, and I'm Assistant Dean with Professional Development and Community Engagement in the Faculty of Education. I'm also a proud UBC alum. I'm honored to be with you all today and extend a warm welcome to start the day off with you all. A reminder that this session is being recorded. Please see the notes in the chat for instructions on turning off your camera and changing your display name if this would suit you. And Sarah's just posting some information about that for you. We'd also like to share some additional resources in the chat to help ensure that this session is a warm and welcoming for all in attendance, including the UBC Respectful Environment Statement and resources pertaining to UBC equity and inclusion. So today, after our three speakers have presented, there will be a question and answer. And as you're listening to the presentations, please consider any questions you may have at the end of the session, and we'll be sure to get to those. We're looking forward to our Q&A. There are always great and very rich discussions. And lastly, before we get started, we'd like to get to know a little bit about you, the audience. And we have a poll function in Zoom. So we're just going to ask a simple question identifying the context from which you are joining us today. And these responses are captured anonymously. So Sarah's going to set that up for you. You should now see the poll on your screen, and we'll give you just a few seconds to respond. Okay. Oh, we have a nice variety of people today. That's great. Thanks, everyone. It really helps our speakers to frame the audience when they have a look at who's joining us today. It's my honor to present our speakers this evening, and we'll also post a link in the chat where you can view their full biographies. So our first speaker is Dr. Jeffrey Wood. Dr. Wood is from Métis and settler ancestry, and he is currently a professor in the School of Education and the School of Indigenous Relations at Laurentian University. He's the early learning lead for the Moosonee Moose Factory District School Area Boards, and Jeffrey has been researching and working with young children for the past 25 years. His research interests include early childhood education, early literacies, inquiry learning, and Indigenous education. Following Dr. Wood, we'll hear from Kirsten Deasey. Kirsten is the District Principal of Learning, Innovation, and Childcare with the Sunshine Coast School District. She's been involved in the early years for more than 30 years. And since 2003, Kirsten has worked with an inspired team of district and community-based early years educators to develop and implement a continuum of support for early years children and families. She uses playful approaches designed to support our youngest citizens. After Kirsten, we'll hear from Aimee Blow. Aimee Blow is a district learning coordinator and a specialized kindergarten teacher with Nanaimo-Ladysmith Public Schools. She has additional training in becoming a pedagogist with Early Childhood Pedagogy Network, mentorship, Reggio-inspired practices, and emergent curriculum. She's known for her passion and dedication for the BC Early Learning Framework. I'd like to really thank our three speakers for joining us today. We've enjoyed getting to know you as we prepare for this evening, and we will start with Dr. Wood.
Miigwech for that introduction, Lynn. That was very kind. Just want to make sure, yep, that you can hear me. Mm-hmm. So thank you. As I start, I think it's important to position myself. Thank you for For the bio, I would just like to add to that I'm coming to you from the traditional lands of the Atikamekw Anishinaabeg, and that I am working and here under the Robinson-Huron Treaty, and I acknowledge the ancestors and the non-human kin that have lived on this land before me. I'm also a father, husband, and an uncle. And I think that all of the work that I'm presenting today comes from my own teaching practice, life experience, but also specifically the work that I've done with various school boards and as the early learning coordinator for the Northeast. But specifically, I'd also like to thank the elders and knowledge keepers who have worked with me across sites and across projects and have supported me in the work that I've been doing and the learning that I've been doing over the past 25 years. One of the things that I would like us to consider today is the idea of an Indigenous early childhood pedagogy. I think that it's vital for the children, the Indigenous children that we work with, that we take an Indigenous approach. Hopefully what I'm going to do is outline the elements that you should include as you work with the children that you work with. And this work comes out of, like I said, years of working with various communities. And I'm not at all presenting a pan-Indigenous perspective. I think the very first thing that we need to consider is that every Indigenous community is different. And so the way that this will look in your community will be different than the way it works in the communities that I work with. And I'd like to start by looking at, even before we start, that it's important to consult with elders from the place where you teach, and that you learn from the elders and engage in ceremony related to the work that you're doing before you even start. So once you've done that, then there are things that we need to consider. And the very first is that all learning is in relation. We're always in relation to each other, our human and non-human kin, the earth, the water. We have snow here in Sudbury today, the sky, our ancestors, the spirit world. And when we're working with children, we're always in relation, and the children are always in relation. And so we need to spend time together in respect and in different settings, inside and, more importantly, outside on the land. We need to include community participation. We need to see learning as a collective experience where the children that we're working with have something to contribute to that learning, to each other's learning, but to our learning as well. And we need to rely on the learning of the community and to include them as a part of our learning and as a part of our teaching. And so, for example, I said that we do this before even starting our practice. So when we did this in Moose Factory, that meant hanging out in the northern store and giving away homemade cookies as we talk to community members with the elder that was involved in leading our project. And it was about consulting with them to see what they were interested in. It means including elders and knowledge keepers as a part of the school community and as a part of the classroom. So once again, in a number of the schools that I work at, this means that having elders and knowledge keepers attached to the school and visiting classrooms and having, a tea with Gookum so that teachers can learn from the Gookums or grandmothers. But there's a safe place for children to go to if they need someone to talk to and learn from. We need to maintain a harmonious relationship with the natural world and maintain a connection with the land and the other than human kin in the area where we're teaching and where we're situated. And we need sometimes, if we're in an urban setting, we need to go out and find that, but it's always there and we can always find that. And we need to be in relation in a good way. And we need to see children always as being in relation. They're always in relation to their community, to their family, to their kin, to their clan, to their ancestors. They're always in relation. And all aspects of life are interconnected, including the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. We need to move away from Western ideas of teaching and learning because learning cannot be compartmentalized and separated. It's always integrated and together. And we need to include ceremony and ritual as a part of our learning and teaching. And we need to see children, when we think about children from an Indigenous perspective, we see them as full citizens, not as future citizens, but each child has a gift for the community. And it's our responsibility as educators to help the child identify that gift and to nurture each child's gift. And we need to engage with storytelling and oral traditions which are local to the community that we're working in. And Jan shared a lot of my work has been on Manitoulin Island, and I've worked with Jigang, and I've worked with Wiki, and I've worked with Whitefish, and each community is different, even though they're on a small geographical area, and even though they're all Anishinaabe. Each community is different, and the stories that are important to be taught and to be shared with the children are different in each one of those communities. And in every community, the local stories and histories and knowledge that needs to be shared will be different. I grew up with the good life teachings, and they're very close to the 7 grandfather teachings, which is on the next slide. But not all communities have this, but I see the connections between communities, and we can see how the learning is done and how each community, the important piece is that each community has a good life teaching, a way to be respectful and to live in a good way with each other. And so sometimes we look at the sacred circle teachings or the medicine wheel teachings, which have become ubiquitous, but they're just the surface. And they're a good reminder that we need to connect with the spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical elements of our students in relation. But we need to remind ourselves that each community is going to have slightly different teachings. And going back to the 7 grandfather teachings, I've been in communities where they talk about the 7 grandfather teachings all coming from courage, because it takes courage to show respect and love and wisdom and generosity and humility. Whereas when I was growing up, I was taught that everything flows from love. That when we, the way that we show love is through respect, by being truthful, by being courageous. And so you can see how on the surface, the teachings in the community, you look at the 7 grandfather teachings. Oh, I can do that. I know what that is. But you need to talk to the elders and the knowledge keepers. When I first started working up in Moose Factory, it took me a little while, but they have 6 seasons, because you have spring, you have summer, you have autumn, you have freeze up, you have winter, and you have breakup, because everything revolves around the ice and the river, because they're on an island. And so unless you engage with the community and talk with the elders, it's not something that you would ever even notice. And it's fundamental to the community. One of the things that's absolutely essential to include in the pedagogy is language and culture as a part of your daily practice when you're teaching. And there's many ways to do this. 2 of the schools that I've worked with have done this through using language, through language immersion. Other schools have used this where the language classes are taught as a part of teacher planning time. Other schools have had teachers include the language as a part of their instruction through calendars, songs, and their interactions with children. In every school that I've worked with, we've tried hard to hire ECEs or in early childhood settings, or teachers that are community members who have the language. But the key is that when we're talking about early childhood, we can all learn to speak at a kindergarten level, right? That's the key, right? We can do it. And initially, when we started out on this project, and I'm thinking specifically of Moose Factory Island, that the teachers were afraid to use the language because they didn't want to get it wrong. But when we look at the fact that we have fewer speakers now than when we started focusing on language 25 years ago, we can't afford not to try, right? If we make small mistakes in the early years, the key is that the students are hearing the language. The specifics can be fixed later on, but they need to see and hear the language as something that is valuable and included in their daily interactions with the adults that they work with. The land matters. And when we're thinking about language and culture, right, the language comes from the land. The culture comes from the language, and identity comes from the culture. And these things are interwoven and interact with each other. And we need to spend time on the land. And as we do that, it allows our students, our Indigenous students, to show who they are in a different setting and in a different way. When we first started doing this at one of the schools that I worked with, the teachers exclaimed, how different some of the children were in their class. They had children that never said a word inside, but when they were outside, they were loud and expressive. And it allows us to see our students and the children we work with more fully. And so we need to spend that time on the land, because the land is what many of our Indigenous students know. The other thing is that when we're dealing with the language and when we're on the land, Indigenous languages are about doing. And so you get that action as a natural part of the teaching and learning when you're out on the land. And so once again, we need to find daily ways of doing this. And so, the schools up north in Moosonee and Moose Factory, what they do is that they take a large chunk of time between the neutral breaks in the class, and they spend that time doing inquiry out on the land. At the immersion schools where I've worked at, what they've done for the teacher planning time is have that as a land-based learning as their planning time. And so there's ways to do it, but regardless, it's something that we need to prioritize. When I was a teacher, we went out every single day. I mean, we're talking beforehand. I mean, as long as it's not minus 50, when it's like that, then we need to find other things, but we need to make it a priority. And it's something that we need to plan for every single day. And it's not enough just to include Indigenous parts to our curriculum. We need to decolonize our classrooms and our curriculum. We need to eliminate colonial structures and return to a learner-focused approach and transform our curricula, not just tweak us. The elders tell us we need to focus on the children, and we need to focus on the children, not curricula. We need to focus on the children in relation. Another thing to consider when you're doing this is that, so when we, once again, in more than one location, when we were starting this, the educators would say, well, the families don't speak the language. And we're somewhat resistant. But I think when we look at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the calls to action, right, we need to see this action as a form of culturally restorative practice. And the thing that I think is really interesting is that as we engage in focusing on the language and the culture, the families, have consistently come back and thanked us for that and are really happy that we're doing it. But the number of grandparents that are so happy to hear their children speaking the language, and singing songs in the language, and the grandparents then start using the language and communicate with their grandchildren is just beautiful, and so important. And the reason why we started this work was because we felt that it was important to do it. It was important for the children. It was the right thing to do. But as we've done it, we found that it allows for different contexts for our students to show who they are, so that we have a better understanding of who the children are as learners, as well as what they're capable of. The other thing that we've done, that we found, is that silly things like their test scores go up, their attendance increases. Part of that's because changes in the office, where we say that where we recognize Indigenous ceremony as an excusable absence. or joining in the harvest. But it's also because the students want to come to school. In one school survey that we had almost 90% of the students say that they loved coming to school because they got to learn about their culture and they got to speak their language. I mean, I was blown away. I don't know anywhere where you've got 90% of the kids that want to come to school and are excited to come to school. It's led to greater community involvement, and like we were hoping, it's led to greater cultural identity with increased capability among the students in speaking their language. And the other sort of positive thing that we weren't expecting is a decrease in visits to the office. And so this introducing an Indigenous early childhood pedagogy makes a significant difference for the children in the school. It makes a significant difference for the communities we work in. And it makes a significant difference for our classrooms. And so I just want to encourage you to consider using this approach. And hopefully you've got enough that you can get started. Miigwech. And
yep. Thank you, Dr. Wood. And we'll now turn it over to Kirsten Deasey for her presentation. Thanks, Kirsten.
Okay. Can you see the slides okay? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wood. That was just beautiful. So amazing to hear about the work that's being done. So I wanted to just focus today really on what the theme of the UBC Early Years Conference is going to be, which is I'm so looking forward to every year. I love it. And this year, it particularly resonated with this idea of focusing on connecting and belonging in the early years and enhancing those relationships between professionals, families, and children. So I'm going to talk about the Sunshine Coast context. I've been introduced already. I'm a district principal on the Sunshine Coast, and my heart's been in the early years for, gosh, 3 decades now with the school district. And I just wanted to show some of the ideas that we've been developing here to really strengthen those connections between professionals, families, and children. But first, I want to acknowledge with respect that I'm zooming here from the unceded and traditional lands of the Squamish, Ahameo, and the Sechelt Nation. And just so amazing. I know everybody else is zooming in from other places across Canada, but just amazing to have this opportunity to be on these beautiful lands and have this opportunity to collaborate and learn together with all of you. This has been a journey that our district has been going on around thinking in new ways and, trying to think about how we can decolonize the structures that we use and the work that we do in schools. And we've adopted, through working with Kevin Lamoureux and Jennifer Cates and so many knowledge keepers, some ways of thinking that are new for us that capture what we call ensouling our schools. And so we've adopted the braid as a metaphor for this work, and the 4 directions of the medicine wheel are represented on this braid, and Martin Broken Leg's circle of courage. And then you see the different strands of the braid, which is the focus of the work that we do in equity and inclusion, compassionate systems leadership, transformative learning, and land-based learning. And all of these different strands that you see at the end of those really are focusing on the work we do in the early years, and also just on this idea that by working in a collaborative way, we're strengthening all of our work together so that the sum is greater than the parts. And so when I think about working collaboratively on the Sunshine Coast in the early years, this same metaphor of thinking about children and families and the elders that are in our community and the extended families that are in our community, and how important it is that they feel connected, and that we have a community that works collaboratively with our community-based early childhood educators in our childcare centers on the Sunshine Coast, our Indigenous childcare centers, with our pedagogists here, and with our family providers. And that our community partners are really woven into this braid. The Sechelt Nation, our local governments and the work that we do with them, our Vancouver Coastal Health Partners and early intervention specialists, our community services, MCFD, and all of the myriad of partners that support the work that we do on the Sunshine Coast, and really then thinking about how can we braid all of this work into the work that we do as a school district with early childhood educators in the school district that work in our seamless day childcares. Almost half of our schools on the Sunshine Coast have seamless day programs where early childhood educators provide care before and after school and stay during the day to collaborate with each other and with kindergarten teachers. We have just before preschools that are offered on the Sunshine Coast, 2 of them. We have Strong Start early childhood educators, and then we have our school age kindergarten and primary teachers. And all of this work together, by working together, is strengthened and more powerful through that collaborative practice. So we've got pathways for connecting and belonging on the Sunshine Coast in the early years. And really, we want to focus on connection and belonging. For years, school districts, including on the Sunshine Coast, we thought about kindergarten transition and how we could support that. And we focus on our work right in the summer or the spring, right before students would start kindergarten. But we just found that it was not early enough, that we didn't know our families very well. And so we backed up over time to start earlier and earlier. And now we actually the school district offers prenatal classes. And we have those opportunities at a time when families are very interested in being resourced and thinking about the futures of their children with lots of hope and anticipation. So we work collaboratively with Vancouver Coastal Health and with their community services office to offer prenatal classes through the school district. And we do this not because we want the school district to be involved with academic messages, but because we know that it just takes time to build relationships. So once families have had a chance to meet us in prenatal classes, they can join the Spark program. And this really provides that opportunity to get to know families over time. So it provides those pathways of connection and belonging that are strengthened because over time we get to know them and we get to hear about their children and we get to think about how we can support each other and resource each other. Parents across the Sunshine Coast participate, caregivers, community early childhood educators participate and get professional development hours to participate. And they come for 90 minutes, 3 times a year, starting at birth, until they enter kindergarten. And that provides us an opportunity to really have lots of conversations together. We focus the program on the early learning framework, and we incorporate the First Peoples principles of learning, which is so important to have this opportunity to actually have conversations with families about the pedagogies and the practices. that are infused in these documents. So Spark classes happen virtually or in person. If they're in person, we offer child minding right on site, and families register for the class that would have other families with children the same age as theirs. Some families, I have, a couple families with 7 children, and they've come to every single Spark class for each of those 7 children. They're very popular and well attended, and people really appreciate them. So the vision of the early learning framework guides our work in the Spark program. And we really focus on understanding and honoring Indigenous cultures and histories and taking those active steps towards reconciliation. Just knowing how important it is in our communities to work with our families. I think, the work that we do in schools can be so amazing and can really support taking action towards truth and reconciliation. But we really feel that involving families in these dialogues, being exposed to new ways of thinking and Indigenous pedagogies is just so critical to this. We live in a community that I think really benefits from holding up and celebrating the Indigenous cultures that we have, and providing this avenue for this dialogue has been really, really important for us. So we encourage families to attend, community partners to attend, early childhood educators can attend as well and get those professional development hours. And in the Spark program, we have slides like this that help us launch into conversations that value elders and grandparents, that, all communities learning often involves more than one generation, and elders and grandparents can be central to early learning programs. And their knowledge of culture, traditions, and language can be just such an important benefit for the children. And that's right from the early learning framework. So in the Spark program, we have many, many grandparents, many elders who participate. It's very rich and vibrant for the diversity that we get attending. And we're able to make those really concrete connections that point to the First Peoples principles of learning, and that learning is embedded in memory and history and story. We're able to show, videos of elders reading and singing with their new ones, and hold up the stories that celebrate Indigenous cultures. We have the opportunity to point parents in the direction of more resources that have videos such as these, and then we give them the resources. So when they attend Spark, they get the books that we've been reading, and they get to take them home after having watched an Indigenous elder read them aloud. We give out lots of different books. We make sure to have some amazing Indigenous content in these books that really encourage reading and talking and sharing, and enjoying each other, that delight in time spent together. And we celebrate language. So on the Sunshine Coast, there's an amazing early childhood development center, the Nanaimo Seashell Nation Center. And they do amazing work, and they have made amazing videos. And so they've encouraged us to show these videos to all of the families that attend our programs. And these are videos that show language, culture, drumming, often very familiar songs that families would recognize, but in the Seashell language. So these opportunities really celebrate all the different ways we can incorporate language. We hand out puppets, we really hold up storytelling, and have these opportunities to show that and model it for families so they see what it looks like. And holding up those oral language traditions and those first languages. We give families lots of stuff when they come, lots of resources, lots of information. But really what they really love is the toys that they get when they come to Spark. So we give them musical instruments. I'm not sure that they love that we give their kids musical instruments when they come to Spark, but we do give them, you know, triangles and shakers and tambourines and talk about language and rhythms. And we also give them water toys, we give them blocks, we give them shovels, because we really want them to be out there on the land with their kids, exploring and enjoying that. So there's lots of incentives to coming to attending the Spark program. And another incentive is the books. So when they come to Spark, they can register to receive Imagination Library books. And that means that they get a free book in the mail once a month until their 5th birthday. So families really love these books. It creates this sense of community where children have been read these books in their homes, and then they'll come to our Strong Start Center or community partner drop-in, and they will see these books and they just get filled with excitement and delight about, you know, what they think is their own experience, and they get to see somebody else reading it or other kids enjoying it as well. So it really creates this sense of connection across our community. In our small community, we've mailed out over 60,000 books to families, and over 2 million have been sent out globally. So it's really an amazing program that's been really a benefit to our community. And then the other thing, that when we're not teaching Spark classes and offering Spark classes, we're really offering families a deeper dive into learning together and thinking together about supporting families. And so we offer these deep dive child development and parenting classes where we talk about attachment, and we offer circle of security, we offer positive discipline, we offer 1-hour parenting solutions that are, you know, based on what families are actually interested in, whether it's, you know, sleep or eating or food or whatever. And we have this opportunity for dialogues with them early on. And these are 6-week classes that allow families to attend for those 6 weeks with childminding, and really get to know each other and get to understand their philosophies and the supports that are available in the community. So it's been really amazing to have these opportunities offered as well. And then there's daily connection. So our Strong Start programs, we have them in the majority of our Sunshine Coast elementary schools where early childhood educators are there. We offer them Monday to Saturday, and we also offer them throughout the summer, because those provide the opportunities for families to really get to know each other, to have an early childhood educator on site. We, you know, celebrate Indigenous culture. You can see the Seashell Nation little longhouse that was built for us. And, you know, we want to create these welcoming spaces that are easily accessible, that families can walk to and experience language and culture and learning and joy together. And then we have the Wonder Wheels bus. So Wonder Wheels was created to reach those more remote communities that we can't get to every day. And so this was painted by a local artist, and we took out all the seats out of the bus, and we create just big playrooms for families, and the bus goes to a different location every day of the week, and we welcome families to climb onto the bus with us, enjoy stories. It's the perfect place to have a circle time, to share music and singing, and it's been a really wonderful opportunity, and it allows us to really get families out onto the land. So every day the Wonder Wheels bus goes to a new location, and families meet us at that location. So they get a chance to really experience all the trails and lands and beaches and waters across the Sunshine Coast that they might not have known about. And we can, you know, introduce them to the land and share some of the knowledge that we know, and welcome people to share their knowledge as well. Early childhood educators, children and families, we partner with our marine centers, our literacy coalitions. So we're always strengthening our partnerships and just offering these opportunities for children to be on the land, experiencing it, learning from it, connecting with that natural world. So lots of benefits to just getting out there and having these unique strategies like Wonder Wheels buses to to take us to new places. And then, right before kindergarten starts, we do have a KinderSpark program, which is in the spring before kindergarten. It's offered in every single elementary school. They're offered for 4 weeks. We've done many different, we've done 18 weeks. We've done all sorts of different things, but families seem to really like 4 weeks of this program. And it's been amazing opportunity to have like the principal of the school and our inclusion support teachers and our early childhood educators and our kindergarten teachers all getting to know each other over these 4 weeks in the schools that these children are going to be attending in kindergarten. They're often held outside at the school or in the kindergarten room, usually a mixture of both. And then for our Nanaimo Seashell Nation Child Development Center, we actually work collaboratively with the team there, and we have the program in that center. So we start there, and that's our place where, the principal comes down from her school, and the kindergarten teachers and inclusion teachers and early childhood educators, and we work with the team in the Child Development Center where these children have been spending their time for all these years before kindergarten. It's a fabulous way to just get to know each other. We always have lots of food, and we surface the stories of our children. So when we talk about surfacing stories, I think we really want to see children as more than test scores, more than, percentiles, more than deficits. And so we've really worked hard on the Sunshine Coast to think about how we can surface the broader stories, the richer stories of our children. And we collaborated with our community partners. And one of our partners discovered what CanChild calls their 6 F-word strategies. And that gets people's attention. But the F words are family and fun and friends, fit and function and future. And we've played with this over time, over many iterations of co-designed, co-development of this to come up with a poster. So this is a poster that is actually completed by children and families. And they can use loose parts if they want to represent it. So the circle is open, so they can represent with materials if they want to, or they can be interviewed and the children will give us their answers to what their favorite things are or what their future hopes are. And it's this fabulous way to really get to know children and through their voice and what they value. So been really wonderful to think about, surfacing those stories that they've been surrounded with for 5 years before they come to kindergarten, from their families and from their cultures, and bringing those in to the kindergarten spaces and having those be the way that we start our conversations with families. This is what one looks like, for instance. So they've, this child actually wrote their own, but often they're just completed by families, by early childhood educators in the community. We work together. And we were going to do it as a project for the few children that were supported by supported child development in our community and had sort of wraparound supports. But we realized that we really wanted this to be a project for everybody. So we now have every child on the Sunshine Coast have this opportunity to have their wonderful me surfaced and celebrated. It's embedded in the KinderSpark program. So this is what it looks like when we have children and telling their stories to their families, and their families write it down. This is what it looks like in the Seashell Nation Nanaimo Child Development Center. This is what it looks like when a child gets to present it to their kindergarten teacher. And then a kindergarten teacher who shows it up in her classroom and uses it as a springboard for when they conference with families. So community connections, we really believe in. We focus on creating communities of practice. We work with our early childhood educators, and we've heard from them loud and clear that they want a story workshop focus. But we've had timing issues with getting together with our early childhood educators who provide childcare in our community. And we finally found a solution where our teachers will stay after school to do creative things like learning about materials, we focused on clay a few weeks ago. And that provides time for the early childhood educators who work later to get off work and join us to work with materials and then to learn together. So from 4 to 6, we work with materials, and 6 to 17 to 7:15, we work on exploring the role of materials in story workshop. This is what it looked like a few weeks ago when we were working together. You can see we've got early childhood educators from our community, from our Seashell Nation childcare. It's very collaborative, socially generative spaces have been created there where the dialogue is amazing. It's led to us creating over 60 lending bins that we lend out to childcares and to our families and to our children and to our teachers. It's also meant that we've been able to think in new ways about working together so that we are able to work in childcares, in kindergartens at different times than we previously thought of before. So afternoons are spent in going into childcares and partnering with them. On professional development days, we go in and we work together, not as experts because we're all learning this together, but as these people who are practicing in a community of practice that believes in having partnerships with children, families, school district, and partners. So we really found that by co-creating and co-learning together, we are better together. So thank you so much for this. And I'm looking forward to the next session too.
Thanks so much, Kirsten. So much going on in Seashell. It's exciting. I'll now turn it over to Aimee Blow for her presentation. Thanks, Aimee.
There we are. Thank you. Just make sure I'm off mute before I start. Love story workshop, Kirsten. Just introduced my kiddos in my kindergarten class to oil pastels today. Crayons cousins. It was great. Sorry to get sidetracked. So many fabulous ideas and things being shared. Lots that I'm resonating with. But I do want to start with the land acknowledgement, and I recognize that I reside and I'm situated on the traditional and unceded territory of the Nanaimo, Staminas, and Stananas First Peoples. And the photo I'm sharing here with you for my land acknowledgement is what's called the forest. It's a near and dear place to myself and colleagues and children at the school that I work at. It is really important to me. It represents a place of gathering and a place of collaboration. And so I've had the privilege to spend my days there outdoors on the land, learning more about what it means to be in relationship with place and in relationship with others, the human and more than human. And being here keeps me present. And so thank you to UBC as well for hosting us and creating opportunity for us to share about our stories and our learnings and our context to provoke those in attendance today. So I am going to share about critically reflective practice in the early years. My name is Aimee Blow. I think I've already said that and shared that, but I'm a granddaughter. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm a mother and I'm a wife, but I'm also an early years educator. And I work in 2 roles in early years. I work in Nanaimo-Ladysmith public schools, and for half of my job, I am a district learning coordinator in the early years, where I get to be a part of the early years team and collaborate on our provincial early years projects, work with ECEs, K-3 primary teachers, Strong Start facilitators, and work with the Early Learning Framework. And I also get to take part in NOI, which is the Network of Innovation and Indigenous Education, Inquiry and Indigenous Education. And I'm really passionate about that as well. And in my second role, I am back in my classroom half-time teaching kindergarten with an amazing kindergarten teacher. And I'm just so happy to be there, because being back in my classroom means I have a place to be curious and to be creative and to reflect on the opportunities that I have to actually build curriculum with children. And so I'd like to start by sharing a small story with just to kind of get us situated about what critical reflection is. And so this is a story that I might have missed if I had not learned about critical reflection. A child last week shared this view with me. While we were out in the forest, the child invited me to sit in a small recessed dugout area at the top of a dirt mound. I was pretty sure that this indentation had been created by many, many children over time on this little spot. So I sat down. This is why I wear my rain pants even when it's not raining, because we sit right in the dirt. Sat down and I looked up, and it caught me off guard. I had not anticipated that this would be the view that I would be seeing when this child invited me to sit down. And I felt that moment of awe and wonder. And then I quickly realized that this is why we slow down, we listen, and we reflect on the small moments of the day. And then I started to wonder if others who share this forest and this place, if they've sat here and have they seen this. I wondered how I might offer this experience back to the children in my classroom and in the other classroom, because we collaborate a lot together. How might the children respond to this experience? And how might this moment help us to come to build relationships with others and place? And so this is just a small glimpse of what critical reflection feels like for me now. It's been a journey, and reflection, though, has always it's become a way of being for me. I can't escape it. Sometimes my thinking happens faster than I would like it to, but it's a part of me. But I'm honored to have this experience to share some of my reflections about critical reflection with you. So some of the context of why we would reflect on our practice and why we'd reflect on educators. And I need to preface, when I say educator, I mean anyone working with children from 0 to 8 years of age, as described by our early learning framework. So yes, I'm a kindergarten teacher, but I call myself an educator. So for educators today, we've had some significant shifts. I'm so grateful to be teaching in BC, where we have this beautiful early learning framework from our ministry. And this early learning framework, it's a tool that we can use to reflect on our practice. And so it describes critical reflection as a tool that we can use to take part in what is called the process of pedagogical narration. I'll say that again, the process of pedagogical narration. Don't let the big words scare you. This is exciting stuff. But we use it as a tool to stop and to check in and to inquire about our practices. And the early learning framework describes critical reflection as involving thinking carefully, really carefully, about our own fundamental beliefs that shape our senses, our sense of self and our sense of others, and also how we view the world. And so really, you might be like, that sounds great. I'm a teacher, I'm graduating, I know what I'm doing. Oh, we have so much to learn after we graduate. And so you might be wondering, why would I wonder? Well, really, because we have the opportunity to make shifts. We have the opportunity to make change in our systems and to better respond to the significant developments that we are experiencing socially, politically, environmentally, and in the cultural context of BC. And these shifts, they have created new realities for us, for families, new realities that require us to think about concepts, to think about language, to think about connection, and that revitalize us to think about our practice. And so I didn't make up that good stuff. It comes right from our early learning framework, page 4. So I'm not plagiarizing. But this is also the reason why the early learning framework was revised, because we are in this time of change. The other piece that has happened for us here in BC is we used to have the Ministry of Education and we used to have the Ministry of Childcare, and we are all one ministry now. So that is quite a significant shift. And I know we're in the process of forming new relationships and working more closely together. And we're learning to go slow. We're learning to work in more emergent ways. And my experience reflecting on my practice makes me feel more comfortable when I'm working with others in this way. And lastly, the other significant piece that is happening is we are having a new document come out any day now, any week now. It's called Learning in the Primary Years. It was previously known as the Primary Program, and it is currently undergoing its own revisions like the BC Early Learning Framework did. But to my knowledge, it's coming out soon, and it also will be a companion document for all educators. Just like the early learning framework is, it's a companion to the early learning framework. And so that's going to help guide us to continue to be responsive in our teaching practices. And we can ask ourselves, what is it that we want to pay attention to? Oh, I see this. Okay. I just see my thesis staring me in the face, and I'll just breathe for a moment. No, it was really good work. It was a journey. So how did I inquire about critical reflection? Well, I completed my Master's of Educational Leadership in 2020. And this is where I studied my own teaching practice. So if you want to know what you're doing, study it. Study what you're doing. But I researched my own thoughts and my own actions and documented them for a period of 15 weeks through journaling. But more specifically, the reason why I wanted to do this is because I was beginning to understand how to make shifts from the theory that I had been taught to the actual practice that I was doing with my learners as a kindergarten teacher. And so I gained a better understanding really of what my own values were. What were my beliefs around teaching, learning, education, my role as a teacher, and how were those beliefs that I held, how were they influencing my thoughts and my actions throughout the day? And so it was, and it continues to be, a journey of learning. My journey really began too when my interests were piqued. All I wanted to be was a kindergarten teacher. And when I graduated, I needed special courses to teach kindergarten. Since then, those requirements have changed, but I'm glad that it was like that at that time, because that is when I heard about the image of the child and the 100 languages of children. And if you have not read the poem by Loris Malaguzzi, The 100 Languages of Children, take time to really carefully read it. It's wonderful. But it really inspired me to learn more about the Reggio approach. It's actually funny, I learned about that approach in the building that I work in today, so everything just kind of feels full circle. But over the years with the Reggio approach, I was always told, you can't do that. You can't do that. And I'm like, what do you mean? I see people doing inspired approaches all the time. And then it clicked for me one day. And what they were telling us, and even when I went to Reggio, is we were being told we have to do that reflective work in our own communities, in our own contexts. We can't just take what they're doing in Italy and plunk it in here, because we're a completely different context. And so that was really the concrete anchor for my thesis, was what would this look like when I'm reflecting on my practice here in BC? And so the way that I did that, as I mentioned, is I did a lot of journaling. I used a process called narrative self-study, and it taught me how to work in a really emergent way, as I had to look for different themes emerge out of my data. And so every day for 15 weeks, I wrote down one thought and one action. And really, I was looking at, what did I think I was doing? And what was I actually doing? Sometimes those aligned and sometimes those did not. So reflective practices continue to teach me to go slow, to allow for change to take place over time. That's something I'm learning, not to rush, and to really deepen my understanding of who I am as an educator and the context that I am in. And so I found that critical reflection was best used as well in collaboration with other people. I started off by myself, and then had 2 really good, close people that I could trust, known as critical friends, and I shared everything I'd written down with them. And so what I did then, which I'll share a couple examples here next, it seems small when I look back on it. But this is now a few years have gone by. And so my thinking, of course, has changed over time. So it feels small when I look at it now. But I hope that it's a sign that I continue to be more comfortable in taking risks, and that I can better align my practices with my beliefs and my values as an educator. And so I encourage everyone and anyone, start small, but make it regular. It might be a journal, it might be doing some sketching at the end of the day. You might have some photos or a video that you want to sit and look at the end of the day. But really, it's that regular practice that will build your skill over time. And I'll just say here, those 2 boxes with the definitions of pedagogy and experiment, I placed them both there. They both are right from our early learning framework. Okay, so some of the findings of my research. Well, it was pretty intense. So glad I did it. Probably do something else again in the future, but for now, this is what I have. So I wanted to look and find some ways where I could create conditions for critical reflection. And one thing that I noticed right away is that I was making my teaching practice public. Yes, that's right. I opened the door, I let other people in, and actually really in great detail, because I also shared my thinking behind it with them. And I was sharing my choices and my thinking. So I had started to make some changes in my classroom environment. I'm a big believer in the environment as the 3rd teacher. And I used to have a teacher desk. And I realized that in order to have more collaboration between the learners and to give them more space in our classroom, I got rid of my desk. And all of a sudden we had so much more space to build and collaborate in. The other piece that I did was I cleaned out my messy art cupboards, the cupboards of shame. I did have a photo, but I took it down. So you're seeing what it looked like afterwards. But what I didn't anticipate is that when I did this to easily find materials, is this became a whole cupboard of creativity that now the children can access as well. And for me, I really wanted to make my practice public, but in turn doing so, our classroom became a space for all of us. This wasn't Mrs. Blow's classroom. This is the community of all of us kindergartners and teachers and everyone coming in together. So out with the desk, out with the messy art supplies. Yes, kids are allowed to go into the cupboards. Yes, kids can fill their own bottles of paint while I'm working with someone. So trust them. They can do these things, right? I did teach them how to fill the paint and all of that, but they can do it. And they love the responsibility. They love the ownership of being in that space. The other piece that I found was about collaborative conversation. And so I began to search for this conversation because I was having all of these thoughts. And before I knew it, I was in a lot of collaborative dialogue. So what I found was that reflection and collaboration, they fit hand in hand. And it brought me a lot of joy, and it built a sense of community too among the primary teachers in my school, because I was like, hey, come on in, let's chat. What about this? What about that? And that almost just became a really informal after hours conversation of reflection. But I was, for example, too, I was sharing my experiences with the other kindergarten teacher, and then we decided to get our classes together. And what we didn't realize is that through conversation and through planning together was that there were all of these new possibilities, my ideas, her ideas that we hadn't thought about until we were collaborating together and reflecting together. And so reflection became a huge wealth of possibilities. And then just be careful because you get too many ideas. You got to pick one and stick with it for a while. Time was an interesting concept. I was reflecting on this idea of time, and what I realized in my data was that time had a real living quality to it. I acknowledged that time, it had a sense of passing, but also a sense of shared experiences. We were learning how we were living together, and I was really looking at how I scheduled time so that it would allow me to create larger blocks of time. And I know, like, in my training, we're 30 minutes, next, and all these transitions for our children through the day. And I know when they start playing, it can be bumpy as they're sorting out materials and where and who and all of those pieces. But these larger blocks of time created a sense of flow. And rather than having 4 or 5 different transitions just before our first recess, now we're coming in and we're having a beautiful soft start. We're connecting with one another. We're engaging in different activities. There's choice. People can eat, they can use the bathroom, all of these things. And then we will have one piece afterwards, perhaps story workshop, and then we're going out for recess. Oh my gosh, does that ever feel nice? And you just feel like you've got this nice natural flow to your day. But it's really shifted my understanding of who I was and what all of a sudden my role is as a teacher when they don't need me there all the time, side by side, directing, telling them what to do, right? So that was a huge shift for me, as I didn't have to be on and directing all the time. And that was an interesting experience because I felt a bit guilty at first. Like, what do I do? Am I not doing my job? Somebody gonna come in and see me standing here? Uh-oh. But what it meant is I had a new role, and it allowed me really to take that time to observe, to sit down beside them, to be involved in their play, to think about what materials to offer them. And so if I hadn't have started thinking about time, I don't know if I would have seen that shift in what I thought my job was as the teacher. And so just even with my role, I began to build these connections between my actions and my thoughts, and viewing the environment as a living space. And in that too, it was so exciting and reassuring that I just started taking more risks. I'm like, well, if I can get rid of my teacher desk and I can clean out the art cupboard, what's next, right? So, and that is also partly too how we got towards that beautiful forested space that I showed in the beginning, because that was us collaborating together and reflecting on what we wanted and needed for our school. So 3 years in the works and we got a gate. Yeah, so now rather than directing all day long, I get to sit and I get to be curious and creative alongside children. And I love it. Presently, after I finished my research, I wondered, what am I going to do with it? But it impacts me every day, every single day. And so using critical reflection is a tool for me. Currently in my practice, I'm still using it. I'm really shifting my understanding to building curriculum with children rather than delivering curriculum, because I hope we are past that. There's still some parts that I feel like I'm delivering, but I'll continue to reflect on that. But building them with them, and even with the other kindergarten classroom collaborating. So now 40 children are building curriculum together. We use the early learning framework, the First People's Principles of Learning, and I can't wait to see the new primary years document come out. But critical reflection, you know, in the classroom, I feel that busyness, the pressure, oh, you got to get through this. You know, here's the book with the curriculum about the letters, and oh, I got to get the next one done, or this event is happening in the school and this event, and it can feel really busy really quickly. And reflection has taught me how to stop, how to kind of check in and go, all these things I think need to be done today. How much time do we actually have? How do we want it to flow throughout the day? And sometimes we don't partake in all the assemblies just because there's a lot of them. So if you're looking for more time, actually, I don't know if principals want me to say that or not. Sorry. Also, as a learning coordinator, I use critical reflection a lot because I have the opportunity to help other people do critical reflection about their practice, about their classroom, and about the curriculum. I get to take part in a lot of community involvement. And as I mentioned before, that my practice of understanding critical reflection and asking questions and being okay with not knowing the answer, trusting that our work together, we will, the answer will emerge for us. And that's a really interesting way of working that we're doing right now in our strengthening early years transitions to kindergarten work, where we're using a compassionate systems leadership. And I'm like, yes, I love it. It feels like the early learning framework. And I feel like this is what we've been waiting for a long time to do. And I'm really excited because it's happening. I also have had the opportunity to work with the Early Childhood Pedagogy Network, and I'm working towards becoming an emerging pedagogist and understanding better about what it means to build curriculum, to know what it means to have pedagogical commitments when you're feeling busy and lost, how to come back to those commitments to anchor yourself and guide yourself or your group. And as I continue to be curious. I continue to be open to learn for new learnings and new possibilities. And I continue to use critical reflection as a tool to be in a living cycle of inquiry with others. And one more slide. Heichka, thank you. Heipsiatka. I just want to speak quickly to this photo. It says photo forest tea as we gather together. This was one of the most profound, critically reflective, collaborative times that I had last spring when we were outdoors, close to where I work with a knowledge keeper, and we got to have a real fire and we made tea from the forest and shared that together. And just as an opportunity to learn outside together, we learned about each other and our practices in a very different way, and we connected in a very different way. And so I'm reflecting on how much I'm longing for more work in that manner. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeffrey, Aimee, and Kirsten, for your wonderful presentations. I'm going to open it up now. We're a little tighter with time than we thought, but so what I'm going to do is just open it up and see if anyone has a question. We've got some questions that we'd like to pose, so please use the raise hand feature in Zoom, or if you raise your hand and I see you on the screen, that'll work as well. So what I'm going to do is start with a question then, Sarah, and this is for you, Jeffrey. How can teacher education programs better support educators in having the awareness and strategies to build welcoming early years environments for all students?
Well, I think the key is, I think, to model, which is something instead of just talking about it. And so spending time out on the land instead of just talking about spending time out on the land. And, one of the things I do is infuse Indigenous teachings throughout so that it's something that we keep coming back to. But by making time, and it's so hard in the university because we have so little time with our students, but stopping and taking the time to enter into relationship with the students, to model that, and to model, more importantly, model valuing that. And so one of the, we spend time outdoors, but we also spend time, I was going to say I do it every week, but this year I wasn't as good at doing it, but every week, but we do a sharing circle, and it helps ground the students. It takes care of their mental well-being, but in doing that, I'm modeling for them a practice they can do in their own classrooms in a way that they can put their students before curriculum. And so constantly coming back to that it's about the relationships and connecting and taking the time to connect.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Kirsten, what are your top strategies for building strong relationships with families and caregivers?
I think probably, as I mentioned, I just think connecting early in lots of different settings, like capitalizing on when families are really interested in accessing supports, whether it's prenatally or during those early years, or before kindergarten. We have a lot of uptake again, where families are just really all of a sudden interested in support. And then thinking about how you can reduce barriers to accessing programs or accessing the resources that families might be interested in at the time. Reducing barriers through like offering virtual options or walkable solutions, or just enough different choices for families. And then spending time, like, creating together, sharing food together, playing together, being on the land together. And then honestly, like we just heard, modeling and really that deep appreciation and celebrating, the children themselves, their culture, helping parents see their own strengths and creating this identity in, with families that they are capable and competent, and their children are too. And I think those are just really, really important for building strong relationships, is that authentic, vulnerable appreciation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Aimee, if you were to offer advice to new early childhood educators, what would it be?
Think about what your values are as an educator. What are you committed to? What are your pedagogical commitments, and how will those guide you when you're working with children? Yeah.
Now I have a question for all of you. Moving forward, what are you most hopeful about with early childhood education, and what's an area that you think is really important that may need improvement? And this can go to anyone who's interested in responding.
I'm really excited that I get more time to know who the early childhood educators are in my community. I feel like we're building a lot of relationship between the school district and the community childcare providers. So that's really exciting for me, because I know that will help support families and children as they transition into the public school setting.
I could build on that. I so agree. I think that an area that we need improvement is to move towards less fragmentation in the early years. And that will only happen if we spend time together, just like we already reflected on, but having those opportunities to connect and talk about language and talk about pedagogy and talk about values, all those things that have already been surfaced. I think it's just a really important area. And then talk about the early learning framework, talk about Indigenous pedagogies, like hold those things up for our families and our communities.
Yeah, I think for me, building on both of what you just said, I think that I know in Ontario and I know in BC, and I think throughout the country, it's becoming increasingly the case that we're developing curricula that is not about what to teach children, but what we believe that 4 or 5 year olds are capable of doing, and that it's our responsibility for teachers to create the conditions where we can see the children do that, as opposed to, and so getting away from prescriptive curriculums and programs, and moving towards that focus on relationship that then allows us the ability to include families, community, right? And to focus on the child's identity and who they are, right? So I think that there's a lot of hope for that. I mean, I also am very aware that there are pressures going the other way for more prescriptive, especially around literacy. It's somehow or another we don't think that children will think that it's important. But, we need to give them joy and connect. Sorry.
There's a question. Thank you, all of you, for your responses. There's a question in the chat, Aimee. Sometimes parents, caregivers struggle to understand the pedagogies we use. Have you had to get parents on board, and how? Or are they pretty much fully supportive?
Both. Communication is key. Even with colleagues and administrators, really the importance of pedagogical documentation, narration, and it is my job to make the learning visible. When the kids are going home saying, "We played today," and I use a lot of electronic portfolios because it's very authentic. And then the parents can actually see, "Oh yeah, look, when you were da-da-da-da-da with the paint today, I noticed you painted your name, or I noticed you painted this great picture about our family and our home." And so it's really me doing that articulation of what the child is learning through our play-based programs. I shouldn't say learning like that. It's different. Sorry.
Thank you. Are there any other questions before we close for the evening? Now's your chance, folks. Well, I'd like to thank you all for, you've really helped us to think about a holistic perspective of teaching and learning, and thinking, Jeffrey, about each child's gift, which I just love. Braiding the body, spirit, mind, and heart, Kirsten, and the imagery that you shared with some of the programs, and the bus was just so fantastic. And exploring critical reflection and finding those sit spots, Aimee, and remembering to think about our own practice. So thank you. I really appreciate the thoughts that you shared with us. And now I'll pass it over to Dr. Hare.
Oh, miigwech. Thank you, Dr. Tomlinson. So I really also just want to extend my gratitude, miigwech, to all our presenters this evening. As I shared at the beginning, one of the goals of the engagement series is to share ideas, inspirations, and innovations. And I think we can certainly all be inspired by the different perspectives that were shared tonight. And we have certainly been gifted with models and approaches that draw from Indigenous worldviews and knowledges and pedagogies, I think, as well as an approach of critically reflective practice to help us engaging in our own pedagogical transformation. So not only have you all provided us with really relevant theory and knowledge to inform these models, but really there's such inspiration from what these look like in practice, and you shared that from your own context, whether it was in the classroom, out on the land, working in community in different ways, and the kinds of collaborations that you describe. And so I appreciate Dr. Wood sharing the key features of an Indigenous learning pedagogy, giving focus to learning relationships, storytelling, culture and language, and land. Kirsten, really attention to just another model of decolonization for us, the ensouling of the child. And so there was just so much richness, I think, to that model and the kinds of activities that you were able to provide. And I was really struck by your comment about collaboration and working together is strengthened through these collaborative practices. So, and Aimee, I really want to draw attention to, or appreciate you sharing with us the importance of critically reflecting on our practices, really thinking about thinking about what we believe and what we know and how we view the world in order to build, I'm going to say, relations and knowledge with place and taking us through your own process of critical reflection. I could really see this humility in your presentation, but just the enthusiasm for that as a practice. And I really believe strongly that as educators, if we really are really serious about engaging with Indigenous knowledges and pedagogies in our work, we do need to look at our practices. And I think you've provided us with one model in which to be able to— I'm not sure I understand. Oh, sorry. That's sorry. I'm sorry, it's touching my watch in the wrong way. But I think having the opportunities to look at our practices is in order to shift those practices to engage with Indigenous ways of knowing, that reflection is really important. But you also brought forward, Aimee, something very important. You remind us that we are in a time of change, whether it's the policy directives, the curriculum innovations, the methodologies or methods to help us assist us with change. But even how, and Jeffrey, you really brought that, well, all of you really brought that to the fore, but how we are viewing children, right? And how we think about families, how we think about children in research and in our practice, and even how we are viewing community as partners, right? So really bringing forward a decolonizing and indigenizing approach to this work. And I think all of these presentations demonstrate for us that there's so much to learn from Indigenous ways of knowing. And so I just very grateful for your presentation. And just lastly, I do want to share, I know the conference and the early years conference we promoted at the beginning, but I just want to share with people that we are currently developing a new MOOC, a new massive open online course in the Faculty of Education. So this is being developed by myself and Laurie Heston, who MIT PhD student. I believe she's on today on today, just participating and watching these presentations. And so that is a MOOC that will be coming forward in the new year. And just want to acknowledge also Dr. Jeffrey Wood's participation in the advisory and providing us with guidance and direction in the development. But I just want to encourage others to look forward to another learning resource again to help shape our practice. So miigwech to everybody, and thank you everybody for joining us this evening.